the podcast is about customer service jobs. So you don't have to like.
Yes, we've been listening. My husband and I have been listening all week. You have such a beautiful voice.
Bless you. Thank you.
So soothing. And I'm like, oh my God, I could listen to her for days.
Appreciate you. Thank you so much. Well, your podcast with him is also very funny. And your publicist wanted me to put you guys together. And I was like, no, I want to give them separate opportunities. Oh, hi, you're listening to Service from Hell, a podcast featuring people that are currently in customer service positions or the lucky few that got out and all of the good, bad, and infinitely irritating things that go along with that work. I'm actor and writer Kate Gaffney, and I'm uniquely qualified to discuss this as I used to work at a very busy and very popular comedy club in Los Angeles, and at least one of you listening right now has probably grabbed me and told me you were ready to order when I was running around like a crazy person. So let's eat. I'd like to welcome our guest, LA-based comic, actor, podcast host, and writer. She doesn't have enough to do. Heather Brooker. Brooker. Am I saying it correctly? Brooker? I will edit this part. Okay, great. Okay. Heather Brooker is an Emmy and Webby award-winning LA-based actress and comedian with over 1 million followers on her social media, y'all, and co-hosts a hilarious podcast called Brooker Family Podcast with her equally hilarious husband, Chris, and their 10-year-old daughter. She's appeared in over, y'all, 40 films and television shows, including Grey's Anatomy, Get Out of My DMs, all y'all fans, I don't want to hear it, The Office, I Have 1,000 Questions, Fresh Off the Boat, The Mindy Project, and so many more. She was the digital entertainment reporter for NBC in Los Angeles, interviewing celebrities and luminaries in Hollywood. Her podcast, Motherhood in Hollywood, won her a Webby Award, and Heather recently spoke at the Girl Up Leadership Summit alongside people you've never heard of, like Michelle Obama, Hillary Clinton, and Meghan Markle, about gender equity and body positivity. That said, I better know Heather from her hilarious viral videos and meeting her right now in real time with all of y'all. So Heather, how hard is it to come up with new videos all the time? How much do you love being an influencer, and what got you into comedy? Tell us everything.
Oh my gosh. Well, to be honest, like coming up with videos is probably one of the hardest parts, is like getting those creative juices flowing. But what's exciting is once I get a little nugget of an idea, then I'm like, oh, I can't let it go until I actually see this video come to life. But the hardest part, as you know, you're a writer and you're a creator too, like coming up with those ideas, they just sort of hit and you're like, this is the one. And then sometimes they're not. Like I just did the most awkward. I pushed myself outside the box to do something fun for Mother's Day. I did a collaboration with Cold Stone Creamery, where they have, like, you know, you've been to Cold Stone, where they mix the ice cream in front of you and all that stuff.
I love it.
So they have these awesome ice cream cakes. And they were like, oh, we want to partner with you. Let's come up with something fun. And I was like, what can I do? And I was like, I'm going to write a musical.
Heather.
I was just like, you know, live in the job that you want. So I was like, I want to be a musical. So I just wrote myself the cheesiest little, like, song about moms to Frank Sinatra's song, Love. And oh, it was terrible, but it was like a train wreck. And they were like, what is this? We love it. So it worked out. It worked out. So just coming up with that nugget of idea is sometimes the hardest part, you know?
Yeah.
And then the second part of your question was, how did I get into comedy?
Mm-hmm.
So when I first moved out to Los Angeles I guess it's been about 17 years ago now, I had dreams of being in the Groundlings. Man, I was going to be on Saturday Night Live. They weren't going to know what hit them. Okay, I was ready. And I came out here and I was like, oh, that's hard. This is going to be hard. There's a years-long wait list to get through their classes. And so I was like, I'm getting old. I think I was all of 28.
28, yeah.
I was like, I'm getting old. My time is passing. And so I went to some other comedy clubs like UCB. There's a now defunct comedy club called Acme Comedy Theater.
They're defunct?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
They were on La Brea.
Yeah.
The owner that bought them just ran it it turned into a rental space. And so I started doing sketch comedy and improv. And I loved doing sketch, and I loved the writing element of it and the control element of it, where I could go, here's where I'm going to get a laugh. Here's where I'm going to get a joke. And all my life, people have told me, like, you should do, and this happens to a lot of stand-up comics, you should do stand-up comedy, like, you know. But for me, it was always like, am I a good comic, or am I just one of those people that's funny in real life?
Those are different things, folks. Those are different things. Yes.
It's a different skill set. Like, am I one of those people that's like, I can tell a story, or can I craft a story and get jokes and beats out of it? So doing that sketch training and like working on that was like, oh, I think I can come up with a beat and then maybe like craft kind of a funny stagey character on top of it or whatever. And then I did eventually go to the Groundlings, and they promptly were like, I went through the whole program and they were like, you're just not Groundlings material, but thank you for your time. And I was like, flip a table, give me back my $5,000.
And that piece.
Yes, please give me back my $5,000 for wasting my time and not even letting me try. But I'm not bitter. Hashtag not bitter. And so that's when I sort of realized, I was like, okay, there's this part of myself that loves to write, that wants to explore this. And I just really needed to sack up and get on the stage and try it. So I took a class with an amazing woman named Judith Shelton. I don't know if you know her, but she's so funny and so quirky and so talented. And her class was so low pressure, but it was just got those juices flowing of like starting to write, starting to think like, how do comics think? And I know it's cheesy because I've heard comics, like big comics, say, oh, I never had to take a class.
Fuck them.
You know?
But it's like, so rude. It's like some people do. And Taylor Tomlinson took classes. Shut up. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like some of the biggest comics did take classes, but there's others who kind of look down on it. And I'm like, I'm not ashamed to say that I need structure. That's the way that I learn. And it's also the way I can build confidence. If I have like some structure and a pattern where I can go, oh, if I apply these skills, then it allows me to be more free creatively. And I can start going, all right, I can push the limits here. I can try this and see what works and what doesn't. So Judith's class sort of kicked that into high gear for me. And I tried it and I started doing comedy for a little while. And then I got pregnant, and having a child sort of flips your world upside down in the best way possible.
Why? So why on earth would that change anything?
I don't know. Weird.
Weird.
So weird. It's like a whole nother person there demanding your attention.
Ugh.
It's annoying. It's all about me. Doesn't she know that? She does now. She's 10, so she knows now it's all about me. But like I started a few years, like maybe it's like a couple of years ago. She's 10 now. So 2 years ago, I was like, God, I'm really missing what I did with comedy, and I'm really missing that stand-up. I'm missing being on that stage and that challenge, because every night, and people I don't think realize this, every time you get on the stage as a comedian, you don't know what to expect. You could have, the crowd could be 100% behind you and they're all on board, or they could immediately hate your face and you have to try to win them over. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And you end up walking off your 5-minute set at 3.5 minutes. Like, I've done that.
I get it.
They hate me. I gotta go. I'm just gonna give my time back to the room, as the senators say, because I know somebody's gonna go over. So
what?
Yeah, never. So when I reconnected with comedy, there is a place in Burbank. I don't know if you've heard of Chili John's.
I have not.
Burbank. They are the oldest continuous running restaurant in Burbank, and they serve the greasiest, juiciest chili, and they put it over spaghetti or on hot dogs, or you can just eat it by itself.
Yes, please.
So good. So they started doing, during the like a year or so after the pandemic, an open mic, and they have a side room. They started doing open mic, and I told Chris, I was like, this feels like a low pressure situation, like comedy in a chili place. Like, let's go check it out. So I brought them with me because we were like, let's have dinner and then let's pop next door and watch comedy. And my 8-year-old sat there and listened to every bro dude talk about his sack, talk about having sex, like just like the most graphic sex stories and horror stories, a lot of women talking about their periods and masturbation and all this stuff. And my 8-year-old was sitting there like, blink, blink, like just wide-eyed, not knowing what they're talking about. And fortunately, after a few of these, I went up to the host and I was like, would you mind bumping me up a little bit so I can get these two out of here? Like, I totally understand. I don't want to be a pain in the butt, but they just really wanted to come. And he was like, sure, no problem. Super cool guy. I think they also wanted to get me out of there because I can't imagine the comics were looking at my 8-year-old like, what the hell, lady? So I was like, I'm going to be the cool mom at the open mics. But that was my first foray back into comedy. And I got a few laughs and I was like, oh, yes, this is why we do it. You know, I wrote something on a piece of paper, I said it out loud and somebody laughed. And there's just a thrill in that. So that's sort of how I got back into doing comedy at a chilly place.
So after you started talking about your sex life with your husband on stage, then I'm certain
my daughter was like,
wow, into it.
What? Yeah. I was like, I think I'm onto something here, making people uncomfortable, making my child uncomfortable. And I still do.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so you got back into comedy then, and then did you find yourself sort of inching back into other rooms and saying like, okay, once that open mic was sort of under your belt, you're like, okay, I'm going to start reaching out to bookers. I'm going to start, here I go.
I did. Well, I was more like, I was too afraid to reach out to bookers at that point. I still have like this deep-seated insecurity that I think comes from the unknown a little bit in this business. You know, there's also, I feel like a lot of comedy is for younger guys. It seemed like everywhere I went, it was all young white men who were all had the same kind of stories. Ugh. And there just didn't seem to be a place for an older plus size 40-year-old mom, you know, and I was like, I don't know if anyone's going to like my joke. So I mostly just stuck to open mics for a long time. And I went to Flappers open mic. They have a women's mic on Thursday nights. And it used to be hosted by my amazing friend, Annalise McNeil. And let me tell you, Annalise is one of the most, like, you want her on your team. She's the biggest cheerleader, the most supportive. When I showed up, she was like, oh my God, Heather. Like, we hadn't connected for a few years. We did improv at UCB. And she was like, oh my God, you have to do comedy. You have to. And I was like, I have to. Like, it just was this like bolster and like this bolster of confidence that I needed. So I kept going back week after week, building up that confidence, building up material, trying new jokes. And that's why then I started venturing out to other open mics and other, experiences. But ultimately, like, that's why women supporting women and being encouraging of other women is so important, because I don't know, without her encouragement, that I would have continued to do it. Wow. Because I was sort of like, I don't know if I'm meant for this. And since then, she booked me on my first like official show at Flappers. It was a Christmas show. And she was like, you're so good. You have to keep doing it. So, it makes a difference. The words you say and the way you encourage yourself, encourage other people, makes a huge difference. And I find that in comedy, that doesn't really happen a lot, because comics are we get so, I don't know if this has been your experience too, but we get so focused and zeroed in on our set. Like, I got to say this, I got to say this. I wrote this in the car on the way here. I want to make sure I get this out. And you're focused on your 5 minutes. You're watching the light. Then you've got the person who booked you like, why didn't you bring more than 3 people? Or, whatever. So you get focused and you forget to encourage other comics, because they remember that. And like, if I ever get to produce a show, I'm going to call Annalise and be like, yeah, please come do my show, So it does make a difference. So her encouragement, doing the open mics repetitively, that is what gave me the confidence to start reaching out and trying to see if I could book other shows.
I love that. And so you're in the circuit now, and you're getting out there. And so I want to go back to stuff we know in your bio, because people will kill me if I don't ask. For Grey's Anatomy, how can they see you?
So Grey's Anatomy, I have to remember what season it was on. It was like one of the earlier seasons of the 20 or so that's been on, like, I think season 6 maybe. Okay. But it was a smaller part, but it was where Dr. Bailey's son was little, and she came in and she thought he had been kidnapped because he was nowhere to be found. No one in the daycare knew where he was, and she was panicking. McDreamy was there, McSteamy was there, Dr. Bailey, and it was me. I had taken him up because he had a nosebleed, and I was like, Dr. Bailey, he's right here. What do you mean? And it was this like intense drama scene that was resolved quickly. But I got to be on set with all of those amazing people and actors, and they were so lovely.
I love hearing that. Okay, got to ask about The Office too. Same question, because we got some Office fans in the crew. Tell me.
Yes. So I was lucky enough to shoot The Office twice. The first time I was cut, And I was devastated.
I would have been too.
Devastated. I literally had told everybody, you know, it's that moment as an actor where you're like, I'm going to be on the biggest show in the world. Like, it was like season 5. So it was like the height of The Office. Everybody in the planet was watching. And it was truly one of the reasons I moved out to LA was because I was like, this is a show that has real people on it that look like me. I want to be on this show. And I manifested it. I was like, I'm going to do it. So I worked really hard to like make that happen. And I was on it. And I was so excited. So I was playing a waitress when Steve Carell and Amy Ryan's character were having lunch. It was an episode called Business Ethics. And he had to do the business ethics.
He was eating lobster or something. Yep. And like he was really mad at her and he made her pay for it. I remember this.
Yes. So I was just the waitress in the scene where he orders like a couple of Big Lobster lunches. You can see it now on the extended cut that Peacock just released. But for years, you could not see my scene anywhere. But now you can see that scene. And then I was on the episode where Jim and Pam had their baby. It was when they were going to the hospital. They check in with me in the hospital and I tell them where to go. And then Steve Carell comes in and he's like, I made t-shirts or whatever. So I was with Jim and Pam and Steve Carell for that episode. And that was one of the most glorious days. I also got cut from that. I got cut
so
twice.
Sorry, Heather.
Because
I'm so sorry.
I know. I was like, it's not meant to be. I'm quitting the business. I'm done.
Done.
Like, it's just not happening. But the reason was NBC, because they knew this was going to be a huge ratings juggernaut, decided to take the Delivery Part 1 and the Delivery Part 2 and make it an hour-long special of shows. So they trimmed off the buttons on each of the shows for time and to sell ads. And I was at the end of the show when they come into the hospital to have the baby.
Ugh. So
it was an easy cut, but it was such a bummer. But you can watch that also, thankfully, on the extended cuts now on Peacock. So I'm like, proof I was on the show.
I didn't lie.
For years, all I had was a picture of me and Steve Carell in a parking lot and me and John Krasinski in like a hospital area. And like nobody believed me. So I was like, I have proof. I swear I was on these shows.
I love it. I'm sorry to hyperfixate on those, but I know that some of our regular listeners would kill me if not.
Yeah.
And then
I totally get it.
And to wrap up this section, so you've won an Emmy and a Webby. We know what the Webby was for. What was the Emmy for?
So I've won a couple of Emmys for journalism.
Wow.
So as a writer and producer, I wrote a special, a half hour, what was it, hour-long special, not half hour, an hour-long special about the Rodney King riots, the anniversary of the Rodney King riots. So I won an Emmy for writing on that. And then because I also worked in news, I've done a lot of coverage with like breaking news. And there was one year where California was literally on fire, the whole state. Do you remember that? We were just on fire out here. And so I produced and wrote and covered breaking news for that. So I won an Emmy for that coverage as well.
Hell yeah. Good for you. And then you got last question in this section. So you did the Girl Up Leadership Summit with some people. So what was was that through being an influencer or a journalist or an actor? What was your way in with that?
I probably got invited because of all of those things combined, but I was working with a company at the time that had sponsored the event. And they invited me to come on and speak about gender equity and about body positivity and how to teach young girls. There's Chris. To teach young girls how to love their bodies and understand about the menstrual cycle and understand the taboos that come along with talking about it, and not just here in the United States, but all over the world. So it was just such a neat experience. Now, it was all over Zoom. So it wasn't like I got to be in the room with those amazing people, but I was on the same like speaker lineup as them. And I just was like, when am I ever going to get this opportunity again? Like, there's no way. But it was just, I'm a big believer. I'm a plus size lady and I love my body, and I've always been very comfortable in my body and in my skin. And now I have a daughter and I want her to feel the same way. Like, never be ashamed of your body. It is what it is. It's going to fluctuate throughout your life. Like, I used to be much smaller, but I was also an athlete who played competitive soccer and was a cheerleader and played girls football. So like different times, different body shape. But no matter what, I never want her to feel ashamed of her body or ashamed of what it can do in any way, in terms of like the natural, when puberty is coming and the natural things that happen when we menstruate and when our breasts grow and like all of that stuff. Not to get like, too TMI on your podcast, but like I was raised to think that there was nothing wrong with that. And I still don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think as women, we hide that part of ourselves, like we should be ashamed in some way. And, there's being discreet and being modest, which is different than feeling shame. Like you don't have to be like, I'm on my period and like, throw tampons you know what I mean? You don't have to do that. I mean, if that's your thing, then do it. But you could be discreet about it, but you don't have to feel shame. So
I love that. Okay, great. Well, I'm so glad I asked. Well, folks, we hope you enjoyed your apps. We're going to go on to the entrees after a quick break. We're back. And now it is time for the entrees. I built that in for when I get ads because it's coming. I'm just going to keep manifesting it.
We're manifesting that dollars.
Thank you, McDonald's Coffee, for sponsoring this next section. Okay.
The McCafe.
Girl, the money of mine they have. Okay. So this is the section where we ask the same questions. I always start the same way. What was the first job you had where the government was taking taxes out of your money? You can say like babysitting and stuff. We've had that answer, but can you think of a first job?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was a Gap girl. My first job was when I was 16 years old and I got a job at the Gap. I was at this really bougie outdoor shopping center in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I'm from. It's called Utica Square. And I worked at the Gap and I folded t-shirts and jeans and dealt with some very wealthy, people who would come in and drop hundreds of dollars on white Oxford button downs and khaki pants. And I, to this day, still fold my jeans and my shirts the same way.
Really?
Like, talk about lifelong skills. Because it would say there's something so neat about the way we always folded the jeans, especially, and they take up less space, but they also look really pretty. So yeah, I worked at the Gap. I was a Gap girl.
Okay, now shout out to former guest Ithamar Enriquez, who worked at a Gap in a very fancy area in Chicago. He used to have people condescend to him on the regular. And so I asked if he had like a sneaky way to get them back without being rude to them. So he would like pretend like they were out of a certain size or anything. I know at 16, I doubt you had the chutzpah to mess with the rich people, but did you? No. Okay.
No, I mean, I was pretty, and to be honest, I have really fond memories of that job because I also made some really good friends. One of my friends from high school also got a job there. And then we met another girl who went to another high school. It was all high schoolers. People don't realize, like, when you go into a lot of these retail and apparel stores, especially, it's high schoolers that you're dealing with, 16, 17-year-olds, maybe 18-year-olds. And so we were just there having fun. Like, we were not trying to go above and beyond. Like, they wanted us to meet their sales goal of like 3 items a piece. Everyone has to have socks. Don't forget to recommend socks or a belt with that outfit. So we would always be like, do you want a belt with that? And they're like, no. And we're like,
okay.
Like even at a young age, I think we all realize like, this is not the money we're making. Like we're not getting paid if they, add a belt or socks or not. I was always surprised. I'd be like, would you like to X socks with that? And people go, okay. And I'm like, really? Oh, they're like
that worked.
$20, but all right. And then I mostly just have fond memories of like the friendships that I made and like hanging out with my friends. And I would just spend like half my paycheck at the store. So I would just put it right back into it and buy like a new skirt or some new shoes or whatever. Like, it was just a really fun job. And if people were rude, nothing stood out in my mind. It definitely did though when I started getting jobs in food service. When I started waiting tables, that's when I was like, oh, people are crappy. Like, what is going on?
Okay, well, let's get into that. So how many customer service jobs have you had total, would you say?
I wrote it down so I could remember.
Tell me.
I have worked, say 7.
Okay, so we said we started with the Gap. What else do we have?
I worked at a dry cleaner. Don't recommend.
Oh, I have so many questions. Okay, keep going.
It was horrible.
Okay.
I worked at a dry cleaner. I worked at a Texas-themed steakhouse. I worked at a bagel shop in college, and I got fired from.
Yes, we're going to talk about that. Okay.
I worked at a very high-end restaurant in Stillwater, Oklahoma, where I went to college, but it was also not great. I worked at a Starbucks inside of a Barnes and Noble.
Oh, wow.
And then I was a tram tour guide at Universal Studios.
Oh, now
the capital of LA.
Shout out to Kristen Wiig, who also did that.
Did she really?
She sure did. It's one of the ways she started to doing it while she was doing Groundlings, which I don't know how she did both. Okay, so that is our 7. I want to micro fixate on a couple of these. Dry cleaner. Were you around the smells and the chemicals and the whatever?
Yeah. No, I was in the front. Checking people in. So people would bring in their dirty, stanky clothes and just everything. And we had to dig through their pockets to make sure there was nothing that was going to like mess up the machines.
Sure.
And we had to like mark the stains, which is disgusting. And now I literally, to the point now where if I have a stain on something that I need to take to the dry cleaners, I just throw it away. I don't want to go in there and be like, oh, this is where I bled. Right here, this is blood, or like, oh, this is where I spilled chocolate down the front of my shirt at Easter. Just get rid of that. Like, it's disgusting and horrible. And this woman, and when you talk about horror stories, this one, I was probably about like 19, I think, maybe when I worked there.
So I was going to ask, okay.
Young. And this woman brings in a garbage bag, which is never a good sign.
No.
She brings in a garbage bag and she's like, hi, I need to get my couch cushions cleaned. And I was like, oh, okay. So she starts pulling it out and she's like, my cat threw up on this one. And I was like, ma'am. And she's like, so if you could just mark that. And I was like, oh, God. She pulled this out and it smelled so bad. And so I start like marking it with the tape because like you have to mark it so they know where to scrub the stains. I just was like, how do you not just try to clean it at home a little bit first?
Yeah, get the chunks out.
Get the chunks out, something. But yeah, no, she just brought it in. She's like, oh, my cat threw up on it. Can you get the stain out? And I was like, what is my life?
What is my life?
Get that college degree so I don't have to do this. No. But that was not a fun experience, the dry cleaner.
So what made you pick that? Because you said you were in college.
I just needed a job. I was, I do not come from money. My mom was a single mom. We were hashtag poverty, and
shout out to poverty.
Yeah, shout out to poverty. We were not wealthy, and I needed a job. And I've always been a hard worker. Like I've never not worked since I was 16 years old. Since I got that job at the Gap, because I liked having my own money, but I also have bills to pay. I paid for my own car. I paid for my own rent, everything. So I needed a job. And this was during the summer when we were in between, I think between my sophomore year and my junior year. And I had an internship at the TV station where I was interning at a TV station, which was like across the street. So I got a job at the dry cleaner because it was super close. So I would go into the dry cleaner in the morning for like 6-7 hours. And then I would go across the street to the TV station for an 8-hour shift to shadow reporters so I could learn how to be a reporter. And I did that like all summer long. And it's in order to help, pay the bills. It's just what you got to do.
God bless. Not everybody has that kind of energy. So you would be able to shadow these reporters.
I was 19.
Yeah, that's a different time, I guess.
I couldn't do that now. I'd be like, thank you.
Thank you. I'm all set. Okay, so how long did you last at the dry cleaner job?
I just did it that summer, like
just
maybe a couple months.
Okay.
And then I was like, I'm out. Because I went back to school. I was in Tulsa and then I went back to Stillwater. So I went back to school. Okay.
The Texas themed steakhouse, which shall remain nameless, was it one of the ones where you could eat the peanuts and throw the shells on the ground?
Yeah. I know which one. I don't mind saying it. It was Lone Star Steakhouse.
What I figured.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I don't mind.
What was that like?
So this was this was a tough situation because and I don't know that they still do this stuff, but when we did it, we danced in the aisles. We line danced in the aisles to country songs. So whenever you were in the middle of service, all of a sudden the music would crank up and
Stop
it
this.
would be like,
this is not
boot,
true.
Scoot, and boogie.
This is not
Brooks
true.
and Dunn.
No.
Oh yeah.
No.
Everybody to the aisles. So you'd be like prepping butter in the back in the ramekins because we had so much prep work from. There was bread, there was butter, there was like ranch. We had to make all the salad. Like it was so much prep work. So you'd be prepping butter and the manager would come in and be like, dance time. And you're like, crap. So you have to put it down, run out, and you're like line dancing. And people are like, can I get a refill? And you're like,
I'm dancing here.
I got one more kick, step, turn. Like so bad. And the time you're kicking up dirty peanut shells everywhere that have literally come out of people's mouths because people are disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember, like, I will say, like, it was a fun job. Like, I'm one of those people, I can make the best out of any situation. And it was fun. The people I worked with were, nice people. There was a lot of sexual shenanigans going on backstage, obviously, which I was never a part of. But I always wanted to hear the juice. Like, tell me what happened. Who hooked up with who last night? I was kind of a nerd, so nobody ever really invited me out to the Coke parties or whatever. And it's fine. I missed out. It's okay.
It's fine. You're not upset about it. Hashtag not bitter.
I'm not mad. I'm not bitter. I like a Coke party. But I never got invited to those. So, but I will never forget this one time. It was a particularly busy dinner rush. And as you can imagine, there's a certain type of clientele that goes to a restaurant like this in Oklahoma. They want their steak, they want their spicy Rita, and they want, like a Miller Lite or whatever, Coors Light.
Cougars.
So I got this table. I got sat with this big table. There's probably like 8 people. Got them their drinks. And I don't know if I just wasn't moving fast enough for them or just didn't like their inappropriate advances when the guy smacked me on the butt.
Ma'am.
Yes. Mm-hmm. But they were not happy with me. And I was like, oh, no, we're not. He put his hands on me. And that happened a lot. I was like, this is not that kind of a roadhouse. You know what I'm saying? So, because we also had to wear these like shorty shorts. It wasn't Hooters short, but they were definitely they were short shorts. And I wasn't the sexiest waitress, I guess, that they thought. And this guy hit me on the butt and I was like, absolutely not. So I walked away and went to my manager and I said, this table I can't. And my manager went over and said, don't put your hands on our waitresses, please. We're going to be swapping Heather out with another waiter. And they were mad. They were really mad. And they did not tip the other waiter because of it. And he was mad at me then because he was like, I got your crappy table. They gave me shit all night. And, and I was like, sorry. That was hands down one of the worst customer service experiences I've ever had because it was like this. They felt entitled to be like, I don't know where they thought they were. I was like, you're at a family steakhouse. Yes, we line dance and we have fun. They make it a party, and there's drinking and whatnot. But it was way, way out of line.
I just can't. No part of my brain can even understand the thought process that makes you as a human being think I can physically connect with this other human, A, in a sexual way, and B, in a way that is not being reciprocated, and C, when they are at their job. Like even people that work at strip clubs, there's a consent element to some of that. And I just, where
there was no champagne room at the steakhouse.
Yes. Shout out to Chris Rock. Yes. Like, right. I don't understand. I try to think of myself at my most wild when I was just living, no consequences, who cares? It's like, I jumped out of a plane. I didn't put hands on people. It's such a weird, I don't get that. It's a weird entitlement thing. And I think, people make choices when they're drunk that they probably wouldn't, they sometimes wouldn't. And that's not an excuse. I think it's more maybe, an explanation or maybe an understanding. But yeah, I mean, I that was the one and only time anything like that had ever happened to me, though. I'm glad that the manager stepped in and took care of it, though. You're lucky.
I know that there's a lot of times that they wouldn't have. They would have been just like, so what? Move on,
Yeah.
But we had a really good manager who stepped in and was like, we're not going to do that. Wow. But yeah, I just, that for sure, when I was thinking about this show, I was like, oh, for sure. That's definitely something that happened to me that I think about the waitresses who are at a Hooters type restaurant where physically they are exposing themselves a little bit more. And I wonder if that happens to them a lot. Like if they're physically touched and have hands put on them a lot. There is an ownership, I think, that in those types of settings that people feel like, oh, I'm here to look at you and also eat the food. And when you're performing and serving, like, I don't know if people think there's a gray area there. There isn't, like, let's be clear, there isn't. But I wonder if they think that maybe because it's a show too. You know what I mean?
It's a really good question. And it makes me I just wrote down, I should get a Hooters server on here. I don't know.
Yeah.
I will say that shout out to Caitlin Bailey, former guest of the podcast, who used to do sex work and talked about how the times she felt the most degraded and the most disgusting were in restaurant jobs where either management and or customers were putting their hands on her because she said there was no consent. I was not participating. It was happening to me or at me. And I think that distinction is so important because I think we spend our time, to your point, like, well, if they're dressed that way, they were asking for it,
Exactly.
They're at this job.
There's definitely that assumption. And, and it's unfortunate because it was a family restaurant.
Yeah.
It never should happen.
Good for you for also talking to the manager, because I don't know at that age that I would have had the guts. I probably would have just taken it on the chin and cried and been mad. But good for you for involving a manager and saying, this isn't how you're going to interact with my body.
Exactly.
Okay. So you mentioned a bagel shop that you were fired from. What happened there?
So this was a job that I really loved because free bagels all day, every day,
Big fan.
Coffee, like the dream. I was living the dream, and I was in college. And it was a drive-through, so there was drive-through work involved, which is always another level of intensity when you're because at this particular job we had to take the drive-through orders and then make the food. So it wasn't there was somebody else there making the food. So we're typing in the order, okay, bagel, blah 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 blah, coffee, whatever. Somebody else would make the coffee, but we would make the food. And so it was very intense. It was a very stressful job, and it opened at 6 in the morning in a college town, mind you.
Who's coming through at 6 a.m. unless they're still out from the night before?
Honestly, yes, those people. But also just like, I don't know. I never understood why we needed to be open at 6 a.m. It was brutal. And my manager always scheduled me for the 6 a.m. shift because she knew I was reliable. I would show up on time, and, I didn't mind doing the drive-through. So yeah, I had gone out the night before. I don't even remember what I was doing, but I was partying, and I just
Coke party.
Did not want to go into work the next day.
I get it.
I just wasn't feeling like I'm tired, and I was like a 20-year-old, and I just didn't want to go in. So I called in sick, and the manager was so mad, but she didn't say anything to me. Not a word to me. I found out I was fired when I showed up the next day for my shift, and I had been taken off the schedule. The guy who was prepping in the back was like, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, "I'm getting ready to work. What are you doing here?" And he was like, "You don't work here anymore." And I was like, "What?" And he goes, "Go look at the schedule." And I was like, "What?" This manager, who was also maybe 21, 22 years old, instead of telling me or calling me and going, "Hey, this is unacceptable. You can't call in sick a few hours before your shift," whatever, which also is asinine because I had literally shown up for every other shift for like a year.
Also, what if you had the flu and you were vomiting and shitting everywhere? Like
exactly.
Sorry,
there was no conversation at all. So I went over and I looked at the schedule. My name had been scratched out for the next 2 weeks of schedules. So I called her and I was like, "Hey, what's going on? Like, I see that I'm off the schedule." And she's like, "Yeah, we just can't have this anymore. Like, you can't call out sick like that." And I was like, "But what if I was sick?" And she's like, "But you weren't. Everyone said they saw you at the bar." And I was like, okay. And so I didn't fight it. I should have maybe pushed back a little more, but she had made up her mind and already scratched off my name from the schedule. This was so long ago, there was no email schedules. But yeah, it was such a bummer because I was like, man, I slipped up one time.
Yeah.
And that I think also kind of propelled my work ethic a little bit more because I'm like, geez, one time I can't mess up.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to lose my job. There's always this fear that's sort of instilled in us that we're going to lose our jobs and they don't, and can't be without a job in this economy. So I think that's incidents like that have always sort of fueled this need to be like, I don't want to get fired. That's like one of the only jobs I've ever been fired from. I was let go because of staffing layoffs of one job, but that's the only job I've ever been fired from.
Well, and it's such
horrible.
Well, it's a weird position too, because it was essentially a peer that was firing you, who was acting out and doing terrible leadership by not calling you.
Yes.
I was fired from a job that way, where I was just taken off the schedule, and then I filed for unemployment because I was so screwed. And the owner pushed back and said she quit. And I was like, I erased my name. I took my name off the schedule. Like I did that when I'm desperate for money and don't know what the hell I'm going to do. Like, come at me, bro. I won that case. Thank you. That's such a wild, I mean, I guess she was young too, but one time, I would be real salty. One time,
and she was like, we're done. And then, she's like, now I'm short staffed.
Yeah,
like,
you dumb fuck. Now, you gotta cover all the 6 a.m.s. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, what an idiot.
Exactly.
Look, pride cometh before the fall. Isn't that what they say? Okay. So you said a high-end restaurant in Oklahoma.
So in Stillwater, this guy he was like an investor or something. He was one of those like permanent college guys that never wanted to leave college.
Mm-hmm.
But he'd been in Stillwater forever. He bought an old house on the edge of town and transformed it into a restaurant and tried to make it seem like it was this like bougie like intimate whatever. But it looked like your grandma's house. Okay. But he had just put up little tables all around. It was dark. There was weird rooms. There wasn't like when you walk into a house, you see there's like a wall for the living room and a wall for the kitchen and like
not an open floor plan. This was your Mima's house. Yeah. Okay, got it.
And the chef was 100% coked out all the time.
Heather,
he rage on us.
There's no way that's possible.
Somebody's eating the fettuccine Alfredo, and we'd be like.
Hashtag Coke party.
We ate all the bread. And you're like, oh God. Was it me? It was totally me. We used to have the most amazing spinach and artichoke dip. We're talking like orgasmic level. Like, oh my God. It was so good. And when you're a poor, like broke college kid and someone's making something you want to eat, like, yeah, we ate the dip. Like we were all be huddled around like rats, like, just couldn't get enough of it because we hadn't eaten or whatever. I'm making me sound like I was like starving, but
I mean, you were a college kid,
broke college kid. So the chef was always coked out of his mind, screaming at us. And the owner thought that it would up the level of the fancy of his restaurant by having us all make Bananas Foster tableside.
No. Can you please explain to people what Bananas Foster is in case they don't know? Yes. Shoot me in the face.
So we had this cart that we would push around. It was this janky old cart that was like, it was like wobbly on this uneven, hard wooden floors of this old house. And we would push this cart up to the tables and we would take the bananas and we would slice bananas. We'd put them in this pan, which had an open like flame, one of those portable flames. Portable stovetop things. Mm-hmm. And we would saute the bananas and then we would put butter and sugar and rum. And then while it was simmering, we would light it on fire in front of everyone for the big show. And then we would pour it over ice cream and be like, enjoy your dessert. And then scooch the cart away.
What's so funny, fancy. But like Mima's houses all have a bunch of curtains and wallpaper and books everywhere. So like lighting things aflame in your Mima's house is dumb. It's a dumb move.
It's so dumb.
Cool.
It was so dumb. And of course, everybody wanted it. Everybody wanted the show because we'd be like, would you like Bananas Foster's dessert? And they're like, oh, is that the thing with the flame? Yes, it is. Everybody wanted it. So all night, you're like trying to get this, what's left of the bread and the fettuccine out to everybody.
Oh,
and
Lord.
Then you're like hoisting up the flambe.
What's left of the bread?
That was wild.
Yeah, no thanks. How long did you last at that job?
Like a couple months, maybe 4 or 5 months. And then I was like, this is too stressful. I couldn't be screamed at anymore by the chef. He was nuts.
That's shocking.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're not your long-standing relationships with jobs is not, that's because you had a goal. You were like, I'm getting through school. I'm going to get out of these jobs. Now, when you, we're going to get to the Starbucks and the tour guide in just a minute, but I want to understand where was the shift in these jobs where you were like, oh, people be pretty people-y. Like I no longer, the rose-colored glasses have come off. Like, do you have a particular job?
I think probably at the steakhouse, at Lone Star Steakhouse, for sure. I was like, oh, people are rude. And then I don't remember people being particularly rude at the restaurant because they were usually at the Stillwater restaurant because they were usually there on a date and they were trying to impress. Like it was like college kids who were trying to impress their dates and
sweet,
a few of the older people in the community on their fancy night out. I don't remember anybody being particularly rude there. It was mostly the staff. I think probably at Lone Star. And then I think working at Starbucks inside Barnes & Noble was tough because people are very crazy about their coffee. They want it a certain way and I had to remake stuff and,
Was it different? Because, I mean, I know that inside of you would think inside of a bookstore, there'd be a bit less of the pressure of like, I need my coffee, I need to go to work. I need my coffee, I need to go. Like that. Was it more of the like, ooh, I want to taste the like notes? It was
very slow. Like, I don't remember there being like a huge morning rush. It was a way more chill. Like if you're going to work at a Starbucks, I would say that's the way to go.
Yeah.
Because it was just very chill. But I do remember people, being like, what's taking so long? Or, a few times for sure. But I have such like hazy memory of that time in my life because that's when I had my first job as a reporter out of college. And I was working in St. Joe, Missouri at a very, very small market there. I was an anchor and a reporter. And I made $13,000 a year.
You couldn't live on that then.
Wage. No. So I had a couple of jobs. And so on the weekends, I would drive into Kansas City, northern Kansas City, and work at the Starbucks inside the Barnes & Noble. And then during the week, I would drive back up and do my job as a reporter. I had to.
Shout out to, I keep doing this in your episode. You're making me think of other people. Shout out to Chester Lampkin, who is now a meteorologist in the DC market. He talked about being a meteorologist where you're needing to be camera ready and you need to do all the studying, the night before, the day before, whatever. And you're having to do exactly what you just described. And it's like, you're not sleeping, but you're expected to be ready for camera. It's like, you're going to look tired because they don't pay them anything either. How were you on camera?
Yes, that reminds me, like you said, this did remind me, I completely forgot. So during that time, I stopped making the drive once I quit the job at Starbucks because I couldn't keep up the drive back and forth. It was like an hour each way, hour and a half each way. So I stopped doing that and I got a job at Dillard's department store that was in St. Joe. And that's a clothing store. And so what I would do is I would go into Dillard's for my shift at 9:00 in the morning. And I would work there until 1, and then I would leave, go to the TV station, and then work all night. But I did that so that I could get money for clothes because somebody called the TV station once after one of my live shots. And this is so horrible. This is where people are horrible. Somebody called the news station and I answered the phone after my live shot because it's a small station. Like there was only 2 of us in the newsroom and I answered the phone and somebody goes, will you tell that girl, Heather, to stop wearing the same jacket night after night? It looks like she pulled it up from the floorboards. It's all wrinkled. She's a mess. Tell her to get some new clothes. And I was like, I'll pass on the message. Now, mind you, I'm like 21 years old. This is my first job.
You don't have any money?
Out of college. I had no money. I had $13,000. I was paying my own rent. I paid my own car payment. It was horrible and it was super embarrassing. And so I got the job at Dillard's so that I could afford to buy clothes for my reporting job.
How do they, Chester didn't know the answer to this either, but like, how do they justify paying on, I know that it's a smaller market, but you're on camera.
It's because so many people want
the job.
And they're like, oh, okay, well then we know we're going to have 100 applicants for this job. Jeez. So let's save as much money as we can because they know people are going to want to do it.
Gross.
And that's ultimately what it is. It was just a highly competitive. I don't know if it's still that same way, but I have a feeling it is. Journalism is a really competitive industry. And it's, Bless. So $13,000 a year. And I thought I'd hit the jackpot. I was like, woo!
It's money, baby. It's less than $1,000 a month after taxes, but it's money.
It's so horrible. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, to your last customer service job, the tram tour guide.
Oh, yes.
Now, I have 2 questions up top so that people who haven't been to Universal will understand kind of what it is. So I know that there is a binder that is like the size of the encyclopedia of shit you have to memorize. Are you also writing your own kind of script, or can you go off of that? Or is it verbatim, you're saying exactly what's in that binder?
You are tested on what's in the binder.
Okay.
You have to say the script that they have for you. You are tested on what they call stall material.
Yes.
So you're given a couple sections of the binder that is your stall material, so that if something on the tour breaks down, or there is some, production that's halted the tour up ahead, you have to be able to talk about something with some knowledge and expertise for a few minutes.
Vamp.
And vamp. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you're given your stall material topics, and mine was weather effects. So I had to learn how to talk about weather effects. That's what I picked. The rest of it, though, yes, because you have certain points in the tour that you have to play a video. You have to point things out. And the thing with the tour is that it changes almost every day if there's a production on the lot. So if there's a production in some of the sound stages, the tram is routed around those, and you may be sent in a different direction. So this day I may be talking about stages 24 and 25, but the next day I'm rerouted and I'm talking about something else. And so it's definitely keeps you on your toes, but there is a lot of room for improv and a lot of room for you to insert your own humor, which for a young improviser and someone who is into comedy, like it's so, I don't keep saying young, anybody can do it. But if you're into improv and you're into comedy, it was like so much fun in that way.
And can you also explain to people, because I know this just from people who have done it, it's an ultra competitive audition based job. Yes. So how did you get in it?
So when I auditioned to be a tour guide, I had seen an ad, I think on like Craigslist even. Like it was like just so random as I was looking for a job. I worked in news at the time, and I had just quit my job here in town at CBS, and I needed a break. I was like, I don't want to work in news anymore. I want to do something fun and silly that allows me to have fun. And I was kind of burnt out on the service industry. So I was like, I don't really want to go into waiting tables or anything like that again. So I was looking for something that was an alternative. And I saw this and I was like, oh, fun. And it said, auditions this day, this time, show up. I got there. There was a couple hundred people.
It's wild.
In line.
For like 5 positions, because the turnover is not a lot.
Yeah. No, it isn't. There are people that have been there 20 plus years, 17 plus years. So I waited in line for about an hour and a half. And then you go into this room. They do it differently now. It's all virtually now. But you went into this room, and I met with basically he was the manager of the studio tour. And there was the director, and then there was somebody that was over training, and they were bringing people in one at a time. You sat down, you had a quick one-on-one face-to-face meeting with them. And I got so lucky because the guy that interviewed me, his name was Randall, and I walked in and Randall goes, oh, and I went, oh, like immediately I was like, oh, a gay. I was like, oh, we're going to be friends. And he was so excited. And just big joyful smile, and I was smiling from ear to ear. So we immediately had a connection and chatted, and he was like, well, I think you're great. And I was like, thanks so much. So then what they do is they're like, we'll call you and let you know. And I was like, okay. So later that night, we got a call that said, you've been invited to the second round of auditions. And it was like, oh my God. So we go to the second round of auditions at the Beverly Garland Hotel. There was about 50 people that had been cut down from 350, 400. There was 50 of us. They brought us in groups up the stage. We had to read from a script. We had to improvise. We had to talk about ourselves. And then they were like, okay. Took a quick break. And they were like, all right, thank yous to number 4, number 7, number 9, number 22, blah, 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 blah. Thank you for coming. All those people get up and leave. Everybody else back on stage. we had to do another read from the script, and then they made further cuts. And the remaining 25 got to go on to the training program. And the training program was 3 weeks long on the tram. Some of it was in the classroom, some of it was on the tram. And then if you made it past the training portion where you had to basically give the whole tour and work on and show off your stall material and all that stuff. It was a very intense process. And then at the end, you basically got like your bid card, your whatever, your golden ticket to go on to Hollywood. And they took 20 of us for my training class. So they cut 5 people from that final training, and they took 20 of us. And then 2 people dropped out like the first week because they didn't want to wear the uniforms.
You go through that whole process and not realize there's a uniform involved. You an idiot.
This girl she was from England, she was British. And she was dating Nikki Sixx, the drummer from Motley Crue. And she loved to tell us about that because she would show up and be like, oh, look at this bag Nikki bought me today. Oh, and we're like, that's like a $500 Coach bag. Why do you need this tour?
Yeah, why are you doing this job? That's what I was thinking.
Here? And she's like, Nikki said I need a job, so I'm getting a job. And we're like, okay. So anyway, she put the uniform on, had a full-on panic attack, and was like, I can't do this. This is hideous. I'm out. And so she quit.
Okay.
So there was 19 of us going into who got hired from my class. Over the next year or so, that would be cut in half, and then a further half. I stayed there for 5 years. I worked there for 5 years as a tour guide.
That's your longest tenure of a customer service job.
That's my longest tenure. Yeah. And I worked my way up to a VIP guide, which was a different, another layer of training, more in depth and more money. Yeah. And I left because I got pregnant and I didn't want to give the tours anymore, just waddling around or sitting on the tram with, with a big belly. But there are people from my class who are still there and have been there for 16 years.
Holy crap. Years. Does it come with health benefits? Like, are you in the system with them?
No.
I didn't think so.
Not unless you get, I think, to a certain number of average hours.
Because it's a union. Yeah, it's AGVA, isn't it?
Yeah. I think it's IATSE. It might be IATSE.
Oh, okay.
I think so. Honestly, I don't remember. I don't even know if I paid my union dues when I was there because I was
for shame, Heather. For shame.
I know. Well, I think it came automatically out of my check. Yeah. I don't think I wrote them anything. But if you get a certain number of hours on average, then I think you qualify for health insurance.
And was the training paid? That 3 weeks of training?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I was like, watch that not be.
It was like $8 an hour.
Okay. What's the weirdest thing somebody asked you or tried to do during a tram that you can remember?
Weirdest thing somebody asked me. I don't know. I mean, people would ask all the time, who they were going to see. Like, are we going to see any celebrities? Like, that was a big thing. And I was always like, it was our job to make it seem like celebrities were just around the corner.
Yeah.
But they never were.
Yeah.
And I'd always be like, yeah, sure. People are like, who are we going to see on the tour today? And I'm like, I don't know. Me, probably.
Jaws, he's coming.
Yeah, watch out for Bruce. There was a lot of questions like that. Like, always just, where's the bathroom? I would tell people what filmed on the whole lot, and then they would go, what filmed here? And I'm like, what have you been doing for the past hour? Yeah. One of the most embarrassing things that I did, I'm sure I'll realize all the awkward stories, of course, when we're done talking. But I love talking to the drivers. The tour guide drivers are just the most fun, really cool. I remember I was on a tour once and I was talking to the driver and we were talking about what we're going to do after work. And I was like, oh my God, there's going to be this really fun party. I can't wait to go, blah, blah, blah. And then I would pop my mic back on, give the tour and then mute it and then blah, 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 blah. Well, at the end of the tour, this woman comes up to me and she goes, I just want you to know that we could hear every word you were saying. We know where you're going tonight, where your party is. Like, you didn't mute yourself and we heard every word you're saying. And it was the worst tour we've ever had. And I was like, oh, thank you for coming. Have a good day. The bathrooms are this way. Bye. And then I just ran away. I was horrified because I was swearing. Like I was
It's just off mic. You're like, they can't hear this.
So bad. I 100% should have been fired. 100%.
Well, they let you stay. You were tenured. That's good. Did any medical emergency ever happen whilst the people were on the tour?
Yeah,
I figured
that happened a couple of times when people. I think there was one time a woman got on when she was pregnant, and when you go into there's an earthquake simulation.
Oh yeah.
She started freaking out. Even though we have signs everywhere, we tell people in the beginning from the safety rules and all of that. She started freaking out, so she pulled the emergency cord. And when that happens, everything shuts down. We have to bring in emergency crews, pull her off the tram, get her. We had to have a car take her back up to the lot. People would drop phones all the time and pull the cord. We have to stop. I have to get out and look for stuff. We had someone with special needs that could not handle it was overstimulated in some of the portions. So we had to stop and call someone and help them get off. So it was things like that a lot that people just were not aware mostly of what they were getting into and what was happening. And then they would go ahead and get on anyway and realize it was too much. So yeah, there was quite a few times like that where we had to help people get off the tour.
Yeah, I worked at Universal as an actor for the Halloween thing, and the number of times, yes, I was. Mean Girl, it was amazing. The number of times we would have to shut down an entire haunted house, and the brights would come on, and we'd have to go hide and get people out because they just couldn't. I mean, fear is a different, and there are aspects of that tour, the backlot tour, that even without the Halloween thing are scary. The simulated earthquake is not, if you're not living in LA, you don't know how bad it can get, and you don't maybe realize it's like a simulation. But yeah, it's an interesting, because I know that Universal has their own fire station and EMT station, and they have their own mini hospital because it's such a big property that when stuff like that happens, it's wild for people who I forget, when you don't live in LA and you don't realize how big studios are, they're their own cities because they're so big that once you're plugged into that system as an employee, it's real hard to get out of it, especially as an actor, because you're like, well, I'm acting. So I'm doing stuff.
Performing.
And being a tour guide is performing. I mean, it truly is. So
there was something, we used to talk about it in the break room all the time where it was like, oh, this must be similar to what it's like to be on Broadway. Because you're performing the same script over and over again, sometimes 4 or 5 times a day. Mm-hmm. And you have to make it seem fresh and interesting every single time. And when you're doing that for years and years and years, at least on Broadway, maybe you do a show for a year or a couple of years or however long your contract is. But the tour, like I said, some people have been there 16, 17 years and they're just saying the same thing over and over and over again because the script really hasn't changed that much. So yeah, there's a lot of monotony in the tour. So I'm sorry for anybody who gets a tour guide that's on their 5th tour of the day.
Oh, it's brutal.
Go early in the morning. That's my recommendation. Go early in the morning because everyone's fresh. They've had their coffee.
Yeah, they're not annoyed.
Or go on what we call the LTD, the last tram of the day, because then all bets are off. Nobody gives any Fs anymore. And they're like, I don't know what filmed over here. Who cares?
We're having the best time. They're 3 cocktails deep. They're like, I'm not driving. Who cares? Exactly. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to go back to my regular questions. What was your favorite job of all of the customer service jobs you've mentioned?
That's a toss-up between the Gap and the tour, the studio tour, because I made so many wonderful friends there. But I think probably the studio tour, because I got a chance to bring in my personality. Yeah. And there's that performance element that we were just talking about. And also, I just love the people that I worked with. It was like-minded actors. We were all goofy and silly. It was like an extension of college, essentially. So it was a really fun job.
It feels like a theater kid's nerd out. I love nerding out with other theater kids, and that's kind of what that feels like.
Have you seen the previews for that new movie, Theater Camp, with Ben Platt?
No.
You have to watch it. It is like Wet Hot American Summer, but for theater camp.
How has that not been made yet? I am already in. I will buy tickets for opening weekend. I'm here for that.
And I think the trailer looks really funny, and I was like, oh my God, I'm totally into this.
I like Ben Platt a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, good. What was your least favorite of all of those jobs? I think I know, but go ahead.
Again, it's a toss-up probably between Lone Star Steakhouse and the dry cleaners, but probably the dry cleaners just because of the ick factor of digging through strangers' pockets and pulling out gum and whatever was in there and stains.
Yeah, I didn't fixate on it enough when you brought it up. I didn't realize that aspect of dry cleaning, because I hate because I hate spending that money. So I only bring them my winter sweaters, and I'm like, ugh, I don't want to, like, these are right before I store them because I didn't wash them all season. So they probably don't smell very good, but it's such a like, I can't imagine.
It's just gross. Just digging through people's dirty, stinky clothes, and you're just like, ugh, and then I'm going to mark your stains.
God, and like try to guess the stain. Like, no thanks.
Guess the stain, and they're like, I don't know what this is, and I'm like, well, it's brown, so who knows?
It's not water, sir.
It doesn't smell like chocolate.
What's the weirdest thing you've been asked to do whilst on the clock?
Weirdest thing I've been asked to do while on the clock. Oh, that's a tough one. Oh my God. Nothing like dead silence on a podcast.
I'm not editing it out. We're keeping it in. Just sit here for the next 10 minutes.
Just see how long it goes. I don't know. I honestly can't think of anything that sticks out as particularly weird or unusual.
I think it's because you already told the cat vomit on the couch story. I think that's
I think that's probably it. Yeah, I was going to say that's probably it.
It's pretty disgusting.
Could you please mark my cat vomit stains? That was a bit much.
And you couldn't say no to that. That's a wild.
I couldn't. I was like, okay, let me get the tape.
Was there ever an incident that made them ask to speak to your manager? I doubt it. You don't have that kind of personality.
That made them want to speak to the manager? Yeah. No, I don't think so. I mean, unless that lady who said she was going to go to customer service and complain or whatever after my incident on the tram.
You would have heard. Universal doesn't play with stuff like that. They would have pulled you aside and been like,
but I don't think she ever did.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't recall ever having a moment where someone was like, "Let me speak to your manager." I'm sure it happened though.
Yeah. Have you ever been stiffed when you worked any of these customer service jobs that were tipped?
Oh, for sure. Okay. At the steakhouse, for sure. Yeah. Like, people come in, order $100 worth of steak and drinks, and then give me like 80 cents.
Would you get annoyed when they would leave change?
Yeah, but I mean, it's still money. I'd be like, whatever, I'll take it as long as it's money. I mean, if it was like that was all they left me, then I'd be like, well, that's really crappy.
Yeah. Okay. And who could you give us? Last question in this section. Can you give us an example of the worst customer? You can't say the guy that grabbed your ass because so obviously he's the worst. But right. Or like an incident with the worst customer, or an archetype of who the worst customer is in a customer service setting. I think the worst kind of customer that comes in is someone that has no empathy or understanding of what your job is in service. People who come in and they think you're just this automaton who is there to serve them at their pleasure and whatever they need, whatever, like, we're just supposed to bend over backwards and do whatever it takes to make them happy, without any understanding that of how hard it is. And like, I may be here serving your margarita and your fried onions, but I also have 5 million things in the back to do, 10 other tables, a manager that's yelling at me to get faster, and a dance that I haven't learned yet that I know I'm going to do in 10 minutes. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot, when you're a server, especially, there's a lot going on in your head at one time. Maybe another table just yelled at you, and now you have to walk up and greet a whole new table and start that process all over again. So I think that, like, one of the worst things you can do if you're a customer going in is to not have some empathy with someone. Yeah. And I don't subscribe to, and I heard somebody say this on a previous podcast, your previous podcast too, is I don't subscribe to the customer is always right. But I also don't subscribe to the server is always right either, because I've had some really terrible service, and I go out of my way to be nice to the server because I know it's a hard job, or in any customer service job. But I definitely try to approach every service job, whether I'm ordering something at a kiosk in the mall, whether I'm buying clothes or whatever, to have some empathy, because I've been in those jobs. I know what it's like. I know they're not making a ton of money. I know somebody before me maybe was just really crappy to them. So just having empathy for people in general is something I wish more people did. Awesome. Well, we're going to move on to the good stuff. We hope you saved room for dessert. What is the nicest thing a customer has done for you whilst you were working? Or like a tram guest or whatever. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I had many tram guests who we used to have this thing called a high five, a tour guide high five. Many tram guests would go up to my manager or my supervisor or customer service and say, we had the best tour with Heather. She was so great. And that was always such a nice feeling. Honestly, something that I try to do in my real life, if I have had wonderful service or somebody made something really special, or I feel like they were really, added to my experience in some way, I will go to the manager or the supervisor. And I know they always think, oh no, look at this Karen coming up to say something. Like, I know they're expecting the worst, but I go out of my way to go tell that supervisor, like, our server was wonderful. She went above and beyond, and we had the best experience here because of her, and will come back because of her or him. I just did that a couple weeks ago at Olive Garden because the very nice lady who waited on us was like so nice. She gave us recommendations. And then at the end, she like hooked us all up with mints, and like extra mints, and was just super nice.
It is
really
nice.
Fun and friendly.
Yes.
And like, it wasn't like she was like, I'm going to be your best friend. She just we had a really great experience because of her. So I made sure I told her supervisor that. And the supervisor was like, okay, thank you so much. Yeah, that's great to know. We're so quick as a society to call it people's faults and say, you did this wrong, or this person didn't do this. And people don't take the time to say when something was good, when something nice and wonderful happened. So I try to do that in my own life.
That's lovely. And so would you get high fives? Like they would give them to you? Because we had a version of this too, where it would eventually give you like gift cards for stuff, right? Like it was like you get enough of them.
You stack up you collect your high fives, and you get like a gift card, or
it's kind of dope.
Extra time, extra day off or something.
Like I'm not 16 anymore, and you know what I would love? I would love an occasional high five where I can go get a gift card because it will make me work harder. Like, I don't care. Yeah. I could be 82 and I would still like, you're acknowledging me. Thanks, everybody.
Just some incentive,
small,
and some acknowledgement of a job well done. And in customer service, it's not easy. It's not easy work. And so, just some acknowledgement. That's all.
Yeah.
I think, and monetary, anything monetary is always appreciated.
Okay.
Like, don't make me come to the after work pizza party. I don't want to do that.
Just give me the cash.
Give me a gift card.
Even if it's $5, fine. You spent more on pizza.
Exactly.
Exactly. Can you describe your favorite customer interaction that you had, or a customer that sticks out?
I mean, I remember when I was at the Gap all those years ago, like all these sweet little ladies. There was one in particular who would always come in every week, and she knew, I mean, I'd been every week, but every couple of weeks. And she would always look for me, and like we had the most lovely, I would help her find things for herself, but also for her grandkids. Oh. And she was just nice, just a nice rich old lady that wanted to shop at the Gap, and kind of remind like his grandmotherly figure. So yeah, that was definitely a sweet moment. So there are good people out there who know how to behave as customers. They're just seem fewer and far between these days.
Yeah, or it takes like 10 of them to make up for one asshole.
Right.
What's the best tip you've ever gotten in any of these jobs? Monetarily.
Also as a tour guide. Yeah. Okay. Also, unless you count finding money in people's pockets at the dry cleaning.
Would you get to keep that?
Oh, hell yeah. I'd be like, $20. Woo! I'm going to buy lunch today. I would get like tips, a couple $100 as a VIP tour guide. You would get big tips. If you had celebrities as your guests, or celebrities that come through, they would tip you generally pretty well. Some celebrities didn't at all, which was surprising.
Can you name names?
I mean, yeah, I remember Jamie Kennedy once. I had him for Halloween Horror Nights.
He's a mess.
And he was, I was with his group, and I was his tour guide all night, like keeping people away or like helping navigate through rides and stuff like that. And at the end of the night, he was like, come here. All right, thank you. You're awesome. And I was like, bro, I've been with you for 7 hours. Really?
Wow.
Like, nothing. He was very nice though, which is great. But I don't know if he just didn't maybe put the connection together. That
he knew.
It would have been nice to tip.
He knew. But, you're being very generous. Yeah. He knew. Yeah. Give me the cash, bro.
But I also think too, like I probably seemed like a mom figure to him that was just sort of there to usher him along. But he was really nice and his group was nice, but no, he did not tip. But that happened, a few times with celebrities and but mostly on VIP tours, especially. And sometimes after the regular tram tour, people would come up and they would try to give me money. And,
wow,
they told us we weren't allowed to accept tips, which is absolutely insane to me. But, yes. They should absolutely let the tour guides take tips. You're paying them $10 an hour. Let them take a little extra $5.
Yeah, they're not seeking them out. You're not saying at the end, if you had a good time, throw it in the cup. Like that's
yeah. And they used to, but for VIP tour guides, I would get maybe $100, couple $100 from a group if they had had a good experience. So that's awesome. That was always really nice.
What's the best lesson that you have personally learned from working in customer service?
I think just going back to what I said about empathy, and I think I also now am a more generous tipper. In those situations. And I think also just a wider understanding of different aspects of customer service, because I have had so many varied jobs. Like not all my customer service jobs were in a restaurant or in clothing and retail or whatever, because I've had a variety of them. Customer service is in so many aspects of our day-to-day life, from your coffee shop to your dry cleaner, to, anybody who's calling you on the phone to sell something, to the kiosk at the mall, like whatever. There's just a lot of different aspects of customer service. Just being more empathetic to people in those situations and realizing they're human beings. They're just trying to make a buck, make their rent, pay their bills. There's never need to be nasty or unkind.
Well, you kind of could. Yeah, that combines the next question, the final question, which was one piece of advice you would give to customers who interact with customer service workers. But I think you've just said it, just empathy and kindness. Yeah. Those are helpful. Yeah. Just a little nugget of empathy and kindness can go a long way. Isn't that wild? Well, Heather, it was so lovely having you on. What's your TikTok? Can you pitch where the podcast with your family is and like how we can get eyes and ears on you? I know you're doing stand up around LA. So your dates, people are going to check your site, but could you give us all that information? Yes, they can check out where I'm going to be doing stand up and performing on my website, heatherbrooker.com. And my family and I have a podcast together. It is my husband, Chris, and I, our 10-year-old daughter, Channing. It's the first ever pop culture and family entertainment podcast for parents and kids. And it's such a joy. And we have so much fun together talking about movies and television shows and video games. And you can listen to that on every major podcast platform and also on brokerfamilypopcast.com. And I'm on social media at Heather Brooker, pretty much on all the platforms. So follow me. I love it. And just to emphasize, the podcast is family friendly. So there's not cursing and like everybody's listening to it. All ages can listen to it. It's fun. It's all welcome, kind of a fun show. Parents can listen to it in their car with their kids and feel comfortable that we're not going to be swearing or anything like that. I love that. Well, folks, we're going to drop your checks now. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to help us out here at Service from Hell, we'd love to have you subscribe, rate, and or review the show wherever you listen. It will help us reach more people that need to be schooled on the art of being kind and will be catharsis for those of us still working in the industry. If you want to get in touch with us directly here at Service from Hell, send us your receipts to servicefromhellpodcast@gmail.com. We always love hearing from you. Remember, if you can't afford to tip, you can't afford to go out. So don't be garbage and be good to people. It's easier that way. Heather, thank you so much for being on. You totally understood the assignment. This was lovely. And before you go, you have to tell us how to fold the jeans in the way, if you can describe it. I know it's probably easier if it's visual, but can you tell us what is the trick on the jeans? So at least the way we did it back then is you fold your jeans in half and then you pull them lengthwise and you pull up that little nubbin in the crotch area so that everything is straight and flat. Then you take the leg of your jeans and you fold it to the top of the pocket where the pocket hits. Flatten everything out. And then you take the bottom and you fold it again right to that top of the pocket. So then you're going to have about 2 or 3 inches of fabric above the pocket, but the majority of the fold is under the pocket. That's I don't know if that made sense. Yeah, it sure did. I'm about to change how I fold my jeans because I'm a weirdo. Yay. All right, Heather. Thank you folks so much for listening. Good night.